Hey guys, and welcome back to Just Ask Jason. Today we are having what I'm calling the Having Coffee edition because these are the conversations that my wife and I have over coffee. That poor woman has to listen to me rant about things like this all the time. Specifically, the thing that we are talking about is, well, why do people leave their faith? The things that you see on the screen right now come from an article or research project done by Pew Research Center in 2014. Although I think the results weren't published for like 2 years in 2016. And they kind of categorized people into different groups and gave data on, well, this is why this group of religiously unaffiliated people left. This is why this group did. And they have a lot of hard data. I'll probably respond to the data in a future devo. But for now, I want to actually respond to a section of the research where they collected anecdotes, where people were just given an opportunity to write down in a short little section why they walked away from the religion that they grew up in. And these are some pretty interesting reasons, stuff about learning about evolution or abuse scandals with clergy. And so we're going to go through, and I'm just going to respond to each one of these. Some of them I'm just going to be pointing out, like, why this position isn't very logical or well thought out. Those answers might come off as a little aggressive, but I'm just trying to be truthful. Some of them I might just respond to as a pastor, like, hey, if a member of my congregation came to me and said, you know, I'm dealing with this, or a family member's dealing with this, what would I say? What would I advise? So we're going to kind of get an eclectic group of responses. Some are going to be very logic-based, and some are going to be a little bit more pastoral in nature, and hopefully some of it will be helpful. So why do people leave their faith? How would a pastor respond to that? Let's get into it. This is, by the way, the study or the publication published in August 24th, 2016. The study, I think, was from a year or two before that. But why American nuns or religiously unaffiliated people left religion behind. So you can go look that up and look at the data yourself if you want to. The first category of people in this study, because all these people they're talking about are nuns, the religiously unaffiliated, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S. Religiously unaffiliated people. And the first group are people who just don't believe anymore. That was their reason. That was the broad category. Well, I just stopped believing. And when they were given an opportunity to explain why they stopped believing, these are some of the anecdotes they gave. The first one is learning about evolution when I went away to college. And I find that interesting and really sad at the same time, because you can believe in evolution and still be a Christian. So this kind of person, I think I'd just tell them, like, hey, go read like John Walton or listen to William Lane Craig talk about Genesis 1 through 3. There's a book from, I think it's by Walton, called The Lost World of Genesis 1, if I recall correctly. So I'd say go read that book, go listen to William Lane Craig. There are plenty of people that are Bible-believing Christians and still believe in evolution. That's just frankly not a good reason to leave the faith. So I'm sorry you were misled into thinking you couldn't believe both, but you can. So please come back. Second, too many Christians doing unchristian things. I get this. I'm a pastor, and I see other pastors or people in our church or people in other churches or wherever, people that I've just followed for a long time because I like their books and I like their preaching, that end up doing things that are really unchristian. And it sure is frustrating. But leaving Christianity because somebody does something they shouldn't be doing, even something really, really, really serious, is really illogical. It's an emotional reaction, right? I'm angry, so I'm going to run. I'm going to take my ball and go home. Is basically what we're doing in that situation. Doing this would be like saying that I don't believe that calculus works because my math teacher cheated on his wife. Like, it just, those two things have nothing to do with each other. If Christianity is true, Christianity is true. And your pastor or someone you went to church with or whoever being a bad person has nothing to do with whether or not the religion itself is true. So it'd be like me not believing things I learned in high school because my teachers were bad people. Like, it just, those two statements have nothing to do with each other. So I understand the hurt there, but it's just not, it's not logical to leave your faith because there are bad people that believe in the same faith. Religion is the opiate of the people. I love this response because it's so lazy. They're just quoting Karl Marx. Karl Marx had a very low opinion of religion. He thought that it kept the proletariat from rising up against their oppressors. So I guess if you buy really hard into like communist theory, I can see where this idea comes from. There was actually a study done in 2020 by Cornell, you can go look up, that was responding or trying to like put data behind this very famous quote that religion is the opiate of the masses. And what they came to is it's not so much an opiate, it's not something that makes them realize that nothing's wrong, as religion is a force that causes very distinct groups to end up having similar viewpoints, which you could say is a good thing or a bad thing. The Cornell study definitely painted it as a bad thing. As a pastor, I actually think it's a very good thing that you're taking people who would have every reason to have like very different viewpoints they might fight over or hate each other for, especially in today's climate, and you're actually bringing them together around a common philosophy, a common viewpoint on the world, and they're actually learning to agree on these subjects. I think that's a beautiful thing. We'll reference that function of religion causing unity in a few minutes when we get to another quote. But yeah, that would be my response to this. Good for you. You know Karl Marx, but the quote's not helpful. Rational thought makes religion go out the window. This is just really bigoted, frankly. There's a lot of really smart people that follow various world religions, not just Christianity. I'm a Christian because I think it makes sense and there's a lot of evidence for it. And I'd point to people like Dr. William Lane Craig, Dr. N.T. Wright, Dr. John Walton. Those are three people that are exceedingly intelligent. Tim Mackey as well, who is also a doctor. Dr. Tim Mackey is another person I would point to. Just as like easy to access people that are exceedingly intelligent. People that maybe don't have the academic background but are still really impressive scholars. Gary Habermas is one. Mike Licona, he does have a good academic background. But these are all like really well thought out, well researched academics that are Christians and argue actively for Christianity. So this quote is just, this is a quote from someone who believes that religious people are stupid. And that's sad because they aren't. Well, at least not all of us. Some of us are. And some people who aren't religious are stupid. But your intelligence has very little to do with whether or not you follow a religion. There are some very smart people who make very good arguments that Christianity is valid and that it should be followed. So, again, this quote just isn't very helpful. Lack of any sort of scientific evidence for a creator. So this one's really interesting. I have to assume something here to kind of respond to it because different people can mean a lot of things by the phrase scientific evidence. Well, what do you qualify as sufficient scientific evidence? So I'm going to assume they mean like hard evidence, like, well, we looked at this with a telescope, or we have this mathematical formula that points to whatever, right? So they're talking about hard scientific evidence. And if your barrier for believing in something outside of the observable universe is hard scientific evidence, you're going to be looking for the rest of your life for something to believe in, and you're never going to find it. This is going to get a little philosophy heavy for just a second, but that's okay. It's not too bad. The question of religion is largely a metaphysical or outside of the physical universe question, whether or not there is a creator and things like that. And when you're asking a metaphysical question, you can't appeal to hard sciences because hard sciences just don't answer those questions. They don't say yes and they don't say no. They just don't have input on the conversation, which is why you're not going to find scientific evidence. And both sides use this argument really poorly where critical atheists will say, well, there's no evidence for a creator, so how could I believe? No scientific evidence. But then believers will say, well, there's no scientific evidence that there's not a creator. And it's like, yeah, because science just doesn't answer that question. So what you're going to want to look into instead is logic and philosophy and history. Especially for a religion like Christianity that's based on historical claims. The foundation of Christianity is that there is an actual historical figure, Jesus of Nazareth, who died and then came back from the dead. So if we have some amount of historical evidence that makes that story look likely, that means Christianity is likely, because people just don't come back from the dead. So if he did, or if you have good evidence to believe that he did, then Christianity is probably true. So I'd point again to Mike Licona and Gary Habermas as good resources to explore that issue. because they have some really good arguments and some really good evidence, especially the minimal facts theory, or minimal facts argument, sorry, that point to Jesus actually living and dying and being resurrected. So lack of any sort of scientific evidence for creator. I really appreciate the question, but I think it comes from the wrong area. You should be looking at logic and philosophy and history, because hard sciences aren't really designed to answer that question. The only other thing I would say is you have to believe in some sort of infinite. From a scientific point of view, you have to believe in some sort of infinite to accept that there is a universe outside of, well, even with a God. So theists believe that God has existed forever. That is an infinite, that he has always existed. If you don't believe in a God, you have to believe that energy has always existed, or matter has always existed, or even the nothingness before matter and energy has always existed. And then there has to be some sort of reason for matter and energy to come into existence. That argument gets very quickly over my head, and definitely over most people's heads. But yeah, you have to believe in some sort of infinite regardless. So I guess from a scientific point of view, there's some sort of conversation we had there. I'm just not prepared to have it. I just realized somewhere along the line that I didn't really believe it. There's not really much to say to this particular quote. This is just, there's nothing in the statement to respond to. As a pastor, someone just said, well, I just don't really believe it anymore. I just asked them, well, why? Like, what changed? What concerns do you have? Because it could be that they read something in the Bible that really hurt them, and they didn't know how to handle that, and so they decided to reject it. It could be they heard something in school or online or whatever that they thought didn't match up, like that first person who said they learned about evolution and gave up on Christianity. Or it could be something else entirely. So I would just, hey, what's going on? And then just sit and listen. Like in this video, because there's no one that I'm talking to besides the people who are listening to the video. I can't sit here and ask these people more questions. But if I was sitting across the table from them, ask like, why, what's going on? Like, and then don't respond, just listen. And once you have all the facts, ask, well, would you allow me to answer some of those? And I think most people would say yes, as long as they feel heard. So I think that's how I'd handle that situation just as a pastor. I'm doing a lot more learning, studying, and kind of making decisions myself rather than listening to someone else. Similar to the last question, I think I'd respond to it the same way, except for I would say, yeah, make decisions for yourself. Like as a Christian, as a pastor, I want everyone in my congregation to think for themselves, to read authors that disagree with me, especially if people like really are ready to dig into it. I'd say read authors that aren't Christians. Read ones that are critical of Christianity, because that's going to stretch your faith and force you to learn to defend it. So read Christopher Hitchens and Bart Ehrman. And I think if you're well-educated in Christian thought and you read those people, then you're probably going to end up pretty angry and realize how poor a lot of their arguments are. But yeah, go read and learn and study and listen to different thinkers inside and outside of the church and figure things out. Because you will, I think if you do enough research and you think about it hard enough, you'll come out the other side not only still a Christian, but you'll come out the other side really strong in your faith and able to teach other people. So hey, I say go do that. Just be careful that you're actually listening to different voices. It's way too frequent that people that are religious will only listen to religious voices and then say that they're well-studied, and they're not. They know one viewpoint really well. And it's way too often, and I think even more frequent, in my experience, that people who are not religious or who are anti-religion will only read people that are anti-religion, and then they'll say, well, I'm really well-studied on this. And it's like, no, you aren't, because you've never heard anyone argue with the people that you idolize. So read both sides of the argument. That's super important, but otherwise, cool. I'm actually going to break the video here, and I'm going to split this up, I think, and actually publish it over a few days. So you're going to get some bonus videos this week. But thank you guys for being here. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And we will love to see you here on Sunday. Bye, guys.